Today I'm following the call, having been challenged and asked to try and state my 10 most memorable experiences of video games. What 10 video games are going to stick with me forever and gave me memories that I'll be carrying around till the day I die. And I've been thinking really hard about this, and yeah, I've got it. I've got 10 images, 10 pictures, 10 recollections of games that just changed me as a person. I think they're fundamental, important life experiences. And yeah, okay, we play gaming just to have fun, but it's so much more than that. And I think these 10 show what that means. Although I promise you, even if I gave you the list of 10 just now and said these are the 10 games, most of them, maybe not all, but most of them, you would not have a clue. You'd never be able to guess why this game's important to me. See if I can surprise you. Mobile phones have kind of taken this off the portable games consoles, but there's still a market for it. But one of the big things about being a child is to be dragged around by your parents when, unless they can find cover, which is expensive, when they want to go somewhere, you've got to go with them. That meant a lot of, I think everyone's childhood to a certain extent, is trudging around, sitting in the back of a car, sitting on a train, however you do it, sitting in the corner of the bank where your parents make changes to their bank account. But you've got to go with them, not going to leave you home alone. So our first gaming console, my first ever exposure to Nintendo was for the Game Boy Color. I think it was Color. It may have been in black and white before we got a Game Boy Color. I may have had a second-hand black and white Game Boy, but we definitely got a Game Boy Color eventually. My younger brother got one, and he got The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. And that was my first real ever exposure to the Legend of Zelda franchise and to Nintendo. I mean, I knew of Mario and I knew of Tetris. Zelda was something a bit more nebulous, sort of. I'd seen it on the shop fronts, but didn't really know anything about it. And this game blew our minds. Just playing it, me watching him watching me, in the back of the car, on a train, or even just in our bedrooms, playing through this game. This epic adventure as you get wash up on a beach and then make your way through an island, eventually overcoming all of these bosses and escaping the island at the end. It was magical. And I've played the Legend of Zelda series since this. There have been some fantastic games. I'm not sure any of them ever quite matched up to that first memory of this one, although I haven't dared to touch the Switch re-release that's come out. I will one day. But the original Link's Awakening is just so magical. It was so brilliantly designed for that small handheld console that had so many limitations, and yet it felt like you were squinting through that LCD cheap screen that was awful compared to today's standards. But behind that screen was a world, a universe just aching to be explored. And I'm always there's lots of games I can point at and say, handheld gaming, but that Link's Awakening, the first Legend of Zelda in the back of the car, beautiful experience. My next selection is not one that's particularly pleasant for me. Now, normally I can't stop extolling the virtues of the original 16-bit Sonic the Hedgehog games. They are fantastic evolutions that inspired so many players and other game developers to really rethink how momentum and player interactivity works in their video games. They are a delight to look at, and I'm really looking forward to the retro recompilation where they're given the hide-screen wash-up, and hopefully a whole new generation of fans will be able to understand and see just why the Blue Hedgehog came from such a fascinating place. But my introduction to Sonic the Hedgehog, the reason I'm maybe a bit of a fanatic for the series doesn't come from love. I think it comes from spite. I could nominate the infamous floating barrel in Sonic the Hedgehog 3, which was a just impenetrable barrier. When I first played, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was my first ever video game that I owned and played in my own house. And there was a level with a barrel that you had to jump on, and somehow it would move up and down when you jumped on it. It was responsive, it bounced, and you had to get underneath it, but no matter how much I tried to time the jumps, I couldn't get underneath. I had to stop playing the game. I mastered an incredibly difficult level select cheat to see the fantastic levels that came after it, but I couldn't master that level. So I then went back and played Sonic 2, Sonic 1. I saw the earlier games in the series and completed them. No problems there. And I was delighted when I discovered that Sonic 3 wasn't the complete package. It was actually only half of the game. And the second half of the series with Sonic and Knuckles, I could actually pick up at the midpoint and play the game to the end of the saga. And I was absolutely delighted and excited and fooled with this prospect of, yes, okay, it doesn't matter that I can't get past this stupid, what the hell is wrong with this barrel in the first half of the game. I can overcome this. So I started playing it. I got it as a Christmas present, started playing through Sonic and Knuckles, got to the Sandopolis zone, which is this lovely desert theme. Sonic hadn't really done desert at this point in time. It was bright, it was vibrant, and there was a rather unique boss at the end of this level that you had to either lure or knock into a sandpit. So you couldn't actually kill the boss on your own, you had to knock it into the sandpit. And then this happened. Now I've edited this footage slightly to try and show you what I felt was happening. The actual screen is a little bit clearer, you can see some of the platforms a bit more, but essentially you leave this bright and vibrant desert and you're stuck in the dark on your own. And I didn't have a clue what was going on. I was a little bit unnerved by this, and I carried on and I kept going through the level, and eventually you reach a point where you release these ghosts, these white toothed fanged monstrosities that circle the screen and then start zooming in on you. And I'd somehow missed all the switches that you're meant to have hit when playing the game. I'd missed all those switches, and so you're meant to have turned the lights back on, and you're meant to have realised that, okay, this level's on a timer. If you keep hitting the switches, the lights will come back on, and as long as the lights are on, the ghosts will go away. But I hadn't done that. I'd reached them in the dark. And it didn't matter what I did, I couldn't progress. They would kill me. And I died. And this was my first ever taste of horror in video games. There was just a nugget of dread in the pit of my stomach that just went, you can't do this. This is unacceptable. This is terrifying. You got to get out. So when I died, I just leant straight forwards and I hit the off button on my Sega Mega Drive, and I turned the game off, and I didn't touch it for a week. And I eventually came back and realised how easy in what I was meant to do was, that I should have hit those light switches. But I somehow had missed them. And I remember that feeling of terror, that feeling of dread, and it's something I'd come back to years later. There's another horror game that's going to appear on this list, but for quite a different reason. But that was my first ever taste as a very young child, encountering something that was incomplete, unfathomable, you couldn't overcome. It was just dreadful. And that's always going to stick with me. Thank you. Sonic the Hedgehog isn't just about running fast. This is about all of the emotions for me. I think the next game for my most memorable gaming list has got to be Soul Reaver. This was the video game series that convinced me that I was playing the games for the story, for the characters, to see what happened next. The original Soul Reaver I got for the Sega Dreamcast, and I struggled with it. It was really difficult, but the character of Raziel, the omnipresent narration of the Elder God, and the nemesis that was Cain, it made me fight through it. And when that game ended on a cliffhanger, and then there was Legacy of Kain 2 on the Sony PlayStation 2, it looked beautiful. It looked like one of the best looking games I'd ever seen. It doesn't hold up that well together now, but this was a must buy. Both me and my brother both agreed that this game, absolutely, we had to get it to see how Raziel's journey would continue. And the gameplay's good. It plays fine. It's not a perfect entry. It's far too linear. But I played this for Raziel, and I played this for Cain. And this, I think, would be the game series for me that showed me I could care about video games by more than just what happened in the moment. I could care about the characters and the storylines and the art form and the drama. My next bad memory with gaming would be Final Fantasy X, and that's not that the game is bad. I love this game because it was my first ever real exposure to a proper role-playing game. I'd played Pokemon, so technically yes, I had played an RPG before, but Pokemon's not about the story, it's about the collectathon mechanics. And actually, this story happened with Pokemon Blue as well, but less severely there. The problem with Final Fantasy X was that we were playing through the game, I was enjoying it, and it was on my brother's PlayStation 2. Now, I'd been lent the game by a friend. He'd said to me, you've got to experience this. And I'd been aware of the Final Fantasy brand for some time. I remember going to the shops and browsing through. They still had Final Fantasy 7, 8 and 9 on the old PlayStation disc. And they had 10, and they had 10 too. And I was looking at the cases going, oh, it's one big story overlapping over 2 games. I'd seen this before in Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, but I'd never seen it in a game that looked like this before. It was like nothing else I'd ever experienced. And so I was getting more and more caught up in the idea of Final Fantasy X and the story and everything and all of the machinations of the big complicated stuff about what would happen to the world of Spira. And I was playing through it, and my brother was watching. And I got to the point where you have a big battle with Sin, who's the giant monster boss that kind of is the nemesis through the game. He's hurting the people. And there's a large battle where you watch as all these people have a fight with Sin. And they're decimated. They're absolutely destroyed. An army goes to war to save their homeland, to protect the people they love. And Sin kills them all. Just remorselessly. They're dead. And I got to that point in the game and I saved it and I was like, oh man, this is some serious stuff for me to process. And then my brother started playing the game. He overwrote my save file. And I remember being absolutely furious that and sure, it's nowhere near the end of the game. It's actually not that far through, but I'd never played RPGs that you were meant to play for more than 10, 15 hours. At this point in time, a game that lasted more than 3 hours was mind-blowing for me. So, Final Fantasy X, I was, maybe 5 hours in? You can put 30 hours into that game if you really try to. I had to replay it from the start. And I was furious, and I remember arguing with my family saying he's not to play the game again until I've got to that point, because I think he'd been keeping pace with me on his so far, and I was absolutely determined on this one game I come first. And I say this relates to my other first RPG experience, because on Pokemon Blue we didn't really understand that there were different save files, and it's not so important there because it's not about the story, but what my brother didn't understand when I lent him my Game Boy and copy of Pokemon Blue is if you shuffle Pokemon around, if you transfer the box that you were saving in. So if you take a Pokemon out of one box and put it into another, because you can only have 6 in your party, the game would automatically save. And so I remember giving him the console thinking it's fine, he doesn't save it, and then him passing it back to me going, this isn't right, I gave it you. So, sorry, I didn't realise it was saving when he was playing. The damage they'd done is significantly less than Final Fantasy X. I was distraught, but I played it from the start again, but this time I knew what I was doing. I bossed through those early levels because I knew exactly where to go, I knew exactly who to talk to. I power played back up to that point. But I always had the back of my mind, things would have been different. The Tidus and Auron and Yuna and the characters who went on from that battle for the rest of my gameplay were not the same characters who went into that battle the first time round. They weren't leveled to the same place. I hadn't done exactly the same choices on the sphere grid. And this may be why I hate games that make you make decisive choices about how you level up your character. Because maybe I always worry that if I play again I won't get the same experience. I'll never... And that for me, maybe this memory is why I associate that so negatively. I'll have to give that some thought. There's going to have to be a second Sonic game on this list because the first one was too much of a downer. It was a really negative feeling. But the most positive feeling, the best feeling I've ever had in video games, was when I purchased, towards the end of its life cycle, a Sega Dreamcast. First console I'd ever purchased. First, not bought for me. I went out for all my savings. I definitely had help, but I purchased it. I brought it home, I put Sonic Adventure in, and I played through the first level and the first boss, and I got to this point here, and then I turned the games console off and I went out on my prom. I had a date, my first ever date, and I partied. I saw all my friends, and I got that transition of I've become an adult, and it was brilliant. But at the same time, and I didn't talk about this with any of them, this was something personal to me. That video game character, the first video game character I'd ever encountered in my console, in my household, Sonic the Hedgehog, that original memory of Sonic 1, 2 and 3, he'd grown up too. He was in the third dimension. He'd caught up with Mario and Rayman and all those other characters. And it was just a really pleasant and warm feeling. I felt that the future was bright. Yeah, things have changed slightly since then, but I will stand to the death that Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2, for their time, were absolute pinnacles of gaming. Of course they've aged. They're not what they are. They're not now what they were then. There is so much better out there. But what they are is completely representative of where the heights of gaming were in 1999 and 2002. They are the best games that were possible for those consoles. And if you love your Sega Dreamcast, you can't complain that they're old and buggy. They were brilliant. My next most memorable game is not chosen because I played it. I have now played it and completed it, come back. But it's going to be Kingdom Hearts 2. And it's going to be Kingdom Hearts 2 because of what the ending of that game meant for me. There is another alternative reality where things went slightly different, where Kingdom Hearts 2 is the last video game I ever played. It's the last video game I ever played when I lived with my parents, when we were one close, tight family, all of us living together. And I was working on completing this game on my brother's PlayStation 2. He was just a few levels ahead of me. We were pretty much doing the game in sync. He'd play for a bit, and then I'd play for a bit. We had an understanding it was his game. I couldn't overtake him, but I could stick level. And the deadline was approaching when I would move out. It was becoming pretty apparent that we weren't sure if we were going to complete this game before I left, and that would be absolutely devastating. Kingdom Hearts, it was the second game in the series, it was actually the third game in the series, the second on the PlayStation 2, and it meant a lot to both of us. The storyline, the fates of these characters was really important to us. So we agreed. I'd stop trying to keep... We both got to the final level, and we agreed I wouldn't try and take the controller off, and I wouldn't try and play it myself. I just said to him, you go, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to watch you. And I want you to beat the game tonight. And I don't remember if that decision was made as we entered the final level, but it was definitely made before we took on that run of final bosses. And there was a point, I don't think my brother was leveled up to the point where he could just stomp all of his bosses. And this wasn't the final mix version again, this is the original version of the game, so there definitely wasn't a fight with Roxas. But the final boss of Kingdom Hearts 2, I don't think he was quite level for. And we went on this run, it was getting late into the night, and we're like, no, we need to stop, but you've not died, we'll just keep going till you die. And the tension of wanting my brother to finish this game so I could see how it would all wrap up was just overwhelming. And he did it. And I got to see that ending, even though I didn't quite play through it all myself. I'd experienced it. And you can do that with video games. I remember experiencing Resident Evil 2 at a friend's house. I didn't see the majority of the game, but I saw a fair chunk of it, and absolutely treasure those shared memories of when you and someone else complete a game together. Even if you don't see all of it, you see enough. And Kingdom Hearts 2 for me will always be that game I saw the end of and I left home. And I didn't take a video games console with me when I left. I may have never picked them back up again. Coincidentally, it was God of War 2 that I saw a friend playing that actually pulled me back in, and when I got back home, it made me go, no, I'm going to get God of War 2 and show my brother what I've discovered while I've been out of the house. And the cycle continues. But Kingdom Hearts 2 could have been the last, and that's pretty special. I'd mentioned that Kingdom Hearts 2 could have been the last video game I ever played. God of War 2 actually showed me that there was so much more in video games still coming out that made me want to go back. But for a couple of years, my gaming experiences were either on my old Game Boy Advance that I'd been lugging around for a very long time at this point, or my brother's PlayStation 2. And he upgraded to a PlayStation 3. And I managed to enjoy and live through gaming through him just when I came back home for periods of time to stay with the family for a while. The point where I said I want to get a video game console for myself was at a birthday party, and there was alcohol and cake and fast food, and we went out for curry. But beyond all of that, there was a Nintendo Wii, and the revelation that was Wii Sports. Just the idea of swinging it's passe. People say this is unlike anything else I've played. Honestly, going back and swinging that controller, playing tennis with the other people at the party, batting that ball back and forth. It was absolutely mind-blowing, and this was perfect party play. I'd seen video games at party before. I'd played video games at party with these same individuals. The go-to game before Wii Sports had always been Mario Kart 64, because that was a fantastic party game. The multiplayer made it. Wii Sports became the game that I had to get, because of my memories of just... I could have played for hours. We had to stop because we had to go out to the curry house to enjoy a fantastic meal out. But I could have played that game till the early hours of the morning had we not had to stop. And so when I eventually managed to hunt down a Wii console on eBay and buy one second hand, and I took it home a few months later and showed it to my family and said, look what I've got. And they were all entrenched as well. And there was this moment of revelation when you were just showing people, I mean, they'd heard about it, they'd seen the adverts on the TV, but actually managing to get one of my grandparents to come and join in the bowling game. It's a very, very special thing Nintendo managed to accomplish. And I will always... A lot of people complain about the Wii for Wegglefest, but no, I will always respect them for what they did with the Wii console. It was absolutely mind-blowingly innovative. My next gaming memory has got to be Guitar Hero 3. And this was a game I played with my housemate. He was a really good musician. He was a pianist. And most musicians I know are quite snobbish about the Guitar Hero franchise. Real guitarists are just like, oh, you just strum these chords and you're not really playing notes. No, because it's not really a music game, it's a rhythm game. It's about timing. And adding that little bit of dexterity, which buttons are you pressing in time with that, it's still a really fun experience. And what Guitar Hero 3 and World Tour did, but predominantly 2 and 3, we had co-op mode where one of us would take the bass and the other one would take the lead guitar. He took the lead guitar, I took the bass, and we did all of the songs in Guitar Hero 3 on the highest difficulty session. That's all of the songs, including that really difficult Metallica one with the solo that is mind-numbing. You play the song for about 6 minutes and then it goes mental and you fail and you have to go again and again and again and again. But we loved every second of it. We loved overcoming that challenge, proving ourselves. And I've got a little bit of muscle memory. I can still go back and do reasonable most Guitar Hero songs on normal difficulty, but that skill that was hardwired into our brains to overcome back then, I definitely could not do now without months of preparation. And I have to look back and say, well, I was on the bass. Technically, I had the easier part. But yeah, just days sat on the edge of the bed, him with one fake plastic guitar in his hands, me with another giant fake plastic guitar in our hands, hooked up to the game's console and just strumming away and reveling in excellent shared music. Oh, that was special. My ninth gaming memory is going to be out of order, but this is Uncharted, Naughty Dog's return to form with Drake's Fortune. Now, a lot of people say the second Uncharted game is the most important for the franchise, but no, this was the game that convinced me that high-definition graphics were worthwhile. I think I've already shown, I was kind of falling out of love with gaming is the wrong word. I just had a lot of other things going on in my life. But the end of the PlayStation 2 era, it didn't feel like it needed to end. Even in the last few years of the PlayStation lifestyle, you had amazing games such as Kingdom Hearts 2 and God of War 2 coming out. We didn't need a PlayStation 3. We didn't feel like the next generation of consoles were necessary because there was still fantastic stuff being released on the hardware we had. So the PlayStation 3 came out, but I wasn't living at home. And I heard later that my brother got it, and I did go home and I did play on it. And okay, maybe the number one game that stood out graphically is going, this is different, this couldn't be on the PlayStation 2, was MotorStorm. And that looked fantastic. It was a really amazing racing game that they drove into the ground by doing too many sequels in a short space of time. That franchise needs to come back. I think enough time has passed now, but it just looked brilliant. But the game that really just made me go, oh, right, I get it, was Uncharted. It looked brilliant. So many different systems came together. It played smoothly. The platforming, the gunplay, the climbing. There was no jump. There was no let up. It just felt connected. It felt real. And Later on, this game came out before PlayStation Trophies came out, but it had its own trophy system. This is the first game that I completed on the PlayStation 3, even though I didn't live in the house where the PlayStation 3 was being held. Every time I came round, I'd play a little bit more of it. I completed it on the hardest difficulty setting. I got every character, every unlock, every weapon, every bonus. And then years later, the Uncharted collection, the remasters on the PS4, this is the game that made me buy the next hardware generation up again. I didn't buy a PlayStation 4 because I saw there were fantastic new games on the PlayStation 4, although I had faith they were coming out. It was the Uncharted collection, and me going, oh, I never owned a PS3, I played it at someone else's house. I want to relive Uncharted. And it was for Uncharted that I bought a PlayStation 4, so I could recomplete Uncharted 1, and again, officially this time on my account, get the Platinum Trophy. It's one of the games there that I can just say, yeah, I lived through it. I've seen everything that game has to offer, and no regrets at all for that. Although the hardest game mode, it's not about the difficulty, it's about the persistence, because you will die a lot on this game. Totally worth it. I promise you there'd be another horror video game on this list, and I want to cast my mind back to Christmas 2012. It was a pretty big year for me. I'd bought the Wii U in November. It's the first video game console that I'd ever bought at launch. I'd got a Wii secondhand. I'd had the Mega Drive bought for me when it was already quite old. I'd bought the Dreamcast and the GameCube years after they'd gone out of fashion. I mean, not before the Wii had come out, I got the GameCube, but it was no longer cutting edge. It was no longer the new console on the block. So the Wii U was quite a big deal for me. It was my first big console. And I bought the pack with Zombie U. I actually purchased the Zombie U Collector's Edition that came out in the United Kingdom. And I also got Nintendo Land. And I gave both of them a go. Nintendo Land got the majority of my attention for that first month. It was bright and vibrant, and it was Nintendo, and it took me a little bit of time to realise this wasn't... Okay, there was some fantastic multiplayer for parties, but it wasn't the big release I wanted it to be. So I turned my attention to Zombie U, Ubisoft's first-person horror survival game. And what I ended up doing was playing that through the majority of the month of December, which is in the house we were renting at the time, which was a very simple one-bedroom, bathroom upstairs, a lounge and a kitchen downstairs, and that was it, which was all the space we needed. But we put up a Christmas tree, and it had blue and white Christmas lights. And I vividly remember coming downstairs at night, putting the Christmas tree lights on, leaving the lounge lights off, and sitting, watching, playing Zombie U, kept safe and comforted by the lights of the Christmas tree beside me. I must have done it for several nights running until I overcome and beat the game. And this isn't an update on how I've evolved to cope with danger since that original Sonic entry. I've grown as a player. I don't need Christmas tree lights, but I've discovered something that Christmas. I discovered that it was just nice to immerse yourself in that duality of something that's absolutely terrifying and soul-destroying happening on the screen. That dread and tension of walking around the corner and not knowing what's going to be waiting for you, and that you could be cut down at any minute, which would be terrifying in the game. That's a game that really does punish you for letting the zombies get you. But I was just accompanied through it by the twinkling Christmas tree lights, keeping me safe and warm, even though I was playing it in the dark. And a lot of people like to play horror games at Halloween. I've ever since then, it's become a tradition for me. If I'm looking at a horror game in my schedule, Halloween's not the time I want to play it. That's passé. The best time for horror games is December. Play it in the dark next to your Christmas tree, and you will feel fantastic. Well, that's it. That's 10 titles that are incredibly memorable to me, incredibly personal to me. Everyone's list is going to be different at this. So if you've got a game or 10 games that are really important and memorable to you, put them in the comments box below. If any of the games I've listed sing to you, put them in the low. Let me know your thoughts. And thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel. We've got loads of interesting stuff already on the channel and coming over the next few months. And thank you very much to Generation Pixel and Sega Blocks, who previously did videos of this type looking at important and memorable video games to them. It really set me off thinking. This wasn't the list of 10 that originally sprang to mind when you spoke about it, but I'm very happy with how it turned out. check their channels out as well for all retro goodness.